What is this thing called love?
But these are two species, said Captain Garm, peering closely at the creatures that had been brought up from the planet below.
His optic organs adjusted focus to maximum sharpness, bulging outwards as they did so. The color patch above them gleamed in quick flashes. Botax felt warmly comfortable to be following color changes once again, after months in a spy cell on the planet trying to make sense out of the modulated sound waves emitted by the natives. Communication by flash was almost like being home in the far-off Perseus arm of the galaxy.
Not two species, he said, but two forms of one species.
Nonsense! They look quite different, vaguely purse-like, thank the entity, and not as disgusting.
That. Captain Garm flashed fretfully.
I sense no rise in temperature.
His heat-detecting tendril had risen to full extension at the top of his head and remained quivering there.
I don't either, said Botax, rather at a loss, but we're doing it just as the space travel stories tell us to.
I think his limbs should be more extended, like that. See, it's working.
Almost absently, Charlie's arm had slid around Marge's soft, nude torso. For a moment, Marge seemed to yield against him, and then she suddenly writhed hard against the pinioning field that still held her with fair firmness.
"Let go!"
The words were muffled against the pressure of Charlie's lips. She bit suddenly, and Charlie leaped away with a wild cry, holding his lower lip, then looking at his fingers for blood.
"What's the idea, lady?" he demanded plaintively.
She said, "We agreed just a peck is all. What were you starting there? You some kind of playboy or something? What am I surrounded with here, Playboy and the Slime Gods?"
Captain Garm flashed rapid alternations of blue and yellow.
"Is it done? How long do we wait now?"
"It seems to me it must happen at once. Throughout all the universe, when you have to bud, you bud, you know. There's no waiting."
"Yes? After thinking of the foul habits you have been describing, I don't think I'll ever bud again. Please get this over with."
"Just a moment, Captain."
But the moments passed, and the captain's flashes turned slowly to a brooding orange, while Botax's nearly dimmed out altogether. Botax finally asked hesitantly,
"Pardon me, madam,
but when will you bud?" "When will I what?"
"Bear young."
"I've got a kid."
"I mean bear young now."
"I should say not. I ain't ready for another kid yet." "What? What?" demanded the captain. "What's she saying?"
"It seems," said Botax, "she does not intend to have young at the moment."
The captain's color patch blazed brightly. "Do you know what I think, investigator? I think you have a sick, perverted mind. Nothing's happening to these creatures. There is no cooperation between them, and no young to be born. I think they're two different species, and that you're playing some kind of foolish game with me."
"But, Captain," said Botax.
"Don't but Captain me," said Garm. "I've had enough. You've upset me, turned my stomach, nauseated me, disgusted me with the whole notion of budding, and wasted my time. You're just looking for headlines and personal glory, and I'll see to it that you don't get them. Get rid of these creatures now. Give that one its skins back, and put them back where you found them. I ought to take the expense of maintaining time stasis all this time out of your salary."
"But, Captain—"
"Back, I say. Put them back in the same place, and at the same instant of time I want this planet untouched, and I'll see to it that it stays untouched." He cast one more furious glance at Botax. "One species, two forms, bosoms, kisses, cooperation. Bah! You are a fool, investigator, a dolt as well, and most of all a sick, sick, sick creature." There was no arguing. Botax, limbs trembling, set about returning the creatures. They stood there at the elevated station, looking around wildly. It was twilight over them, and the approaching train was just making itself known as a faint rumble in the distance. Marge said hesitantly, "Mister, did it really happen?" Charlie nodded. "I remember it." Marge said, "We can't tell anybody." "Sure not. They'd say we was nuts, know what I mean?" "Uh-huh." "Well," she edged away. Charlie said, "Listen, I'm sorry you was embarrassed. It was none of my doing." "That's all right, I know." Marge's eyes considered the wooden platform at her feet. The sound of the train was louder. "I mean, you know, lady, he wasn't really bad. In fact, you looked good, but I was kind of embarrassed to say that." Suddenly she smiled. "It's all right." "You want maybe to have a cup of coffee with me just to relax you? My wife, she's not really expecting me for a while." "Oh? Well, Ed's out of town for the weekend, so I got only an empty apartment to go home to. My little boy is visiting at my mother's," she explained. "Come on, then. We've been kind of introduced." "I'll say," she laughed. The train pulled in, but they turned away, walking down the narrow stairway to the street. They had a couple of cocktails, actually, and then Charlie couldn't let her go home in the dark alone, so he saw her to her door. Marge was bound to invite him in for a few moments, naturally. Meanwhile, back in the spaceship, the crushed Botax was making a final effort to prove his case. While Garm prepared the ship for departure, Botax hastily set up the tight-beam visiscreen for a last look at his specimens. He focused in on Charlie and Marge in her apartment. His tendrils stiffened, and he began flashing in a coruscating rainbow of colors. "Captain Garm! Captain! Look what they're doing now!" But at that very instant, the ship winked out of time stasis.